What regional Queenslanders need right now from the Morrison government is a jobs plan, so they can have some certainty about what will happen when support is taken away. But instead of a jobs plan, instead of actual funding, there's just announcements and no delivery. You always have to check the fine print with this government. You always have to check the fine print, and you always have to check the delivery, because that is where they let Queenslanders down. When it comes to NAIF, it's been 5 years since the $5 billion fund was announced, and only $1.7 million has been relieved in Queensland. In far north Queensland, where the NAIF HQ is based, where they have a very nice corporate office, not a single cent of NAIF funding has been released. When it comes to infrastructure, the Prime Minister said that he would fast-track 15 projects across the country, but only one of those projects is in Queensland, and not a single project is north of Brisbane. That Inland Rail project, which, granted, takes up for the majority is in New South Wales and Victoria, won't start construction in Queensland until 2023 or 2022 or 2023. The officials weren't quite clear about the details of when the one single project will begin. And despite announcements today about bringing defence upgrades forward, upgrades to HMAS Cairns, which had previously been announced, won't actually start construction until 2022. But it has to be the delivery of Indigenous housing that has been the biggest failure of this government in Queensland. Because during the final days of 2019 federal election, the Morrison government, the member for Leichhardt, Warren Entsch, promised a re-elected Morrison government would directly deliver $105 million in funding to remote far north communities to build social housing. We are now 15 months on from that announcement, and the LNP have only delivered 4.7% of that funding. What is clear during COVID is that housing is necessary. It is a basic human right, and it keeps people safe. I visited Arakoon and Wujal in the last couple of weeks, and I was shocked to find out that people in those communities are living in houses with 30 to 40 people in those homes. 30 to 40 people, and sometimes more than that, in a 3-bedroom house in Australia, in a place that was promised funding from the Morrison government. And this is a one-off payment. It is not reoccurring funding. The federal government has a responsibility to deliver this funding, but they've passed the buck and they haven't delivered. And that is absolutely disgraceful at a time during a pandemic when we know that overcrowding in houses will lead to a health risk to First Nations people. The Morrison government give as many pats on the back that it likes, but right now, under this government, there are First Australians who have been promised safe and secure housing 15 months ago and are still living in conditions that are putting their health at risk, and that is not good enough. And the other reason that this funding is so important is because of the extreme health risk that COVID relates to people living in those communities. The previous speaker, Senator from Queensland, said that the Palaszczuk government had been reckless abandonment when it came to protecting Queenslanders. This is high stakes because the government, the federal government, has failed to deliver housing funding to remote communities, which means that if there was a COVID outbreak in those communities, it would be devastating.